Alright, here's the start of our birth vlog. Sort of, because you started filming earlier.
Yeah.
With my second birth, things started at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Baby was born 10:30 something in the evening. It was a little bit shorter, just a couple hours shorter from start to finish, from like the very first contraction to the time that he was born. It was about 2 hours quicker than my first birth. Both were relatively quick. It wasn't like a 2 hour start to finish birth like some births are, but the second one, was roughly 8 hours start to finish, and that is from the most mild hints of contractions all the way to the time that he was born. So really, it was not very long, which for me has kind of been my big hope with birth, is that I didn't want to get into a situation where I just got tired, because I feel like that's where moms really start to struggle. At least that's what I was seeing with a lot of these birth vlogs, is that, the unmedicated births just got a lot harder when moms were experiencing fatigue, because then you're mentally exhausted, emotionally it gets a lot more difficult. Fortunately, I did not have to deal with that with either of my first two births. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen with this one. We are doing 2.5 months, so we'll see. But I do find that some of the things that helped leading up to both is I just walked a ton. For the whole third trimester, I was doing 10,000 steps a day, and then last couple weeks, I was doing like 20,000 steps a day, just walking, trying to make sure that I'm physically as strong as I can be. It is really difficult for me to exercise during my pregnancies because I get really bad sciatic nerve pain. Obviously, you get that hip pain. That's pretty normal with pregnancy. I get really sick in my first trimester, which means that I'm in bed for 2 months and I lose pretty much all of my muscle mass. It's pretty bad. So it is really hard to kind of get back into things, but I just walk as much as I can. I do some like lunges and those sorts of things to sort of strengthen my muscles, and I do some relaxation exercises. I do some different Bradley method type. There's some tips and techniques that he recommends to help you prepare for labor. And I do feel like that helped with both of them. I also do like red raspberry leaf tea and eating dates every single day as well. So with the second birth, about 2 p.m. was when I started feeling these contractions. They were very mild. I was with my sister at the time. She was visiting for the holidays, and from college she was visiting. Yeah, I believe she was visiting over the holiday. And so I basically said goodbye to her. We were at the park with my youngest daughter. Maybe it was with both my daughters, my stepdaughter and my biological daughter. I just know we were at the park, and I started having these very mild contractions. I told my sister, hey, I think this is going to be it. I think this is the day that we're having the baby. And I had already pulled out my timer on my phone. My timer app was starting to time the contractions, how far apart they were. So we parted ways. I said goodbye to her. We headed back to our apartment. Then I called my husband, let him know, or I sent him a text basically. He was at work, so he went ahead and met us at the apartment. Got all ready for us to have a baby again, because we knew how quickly things had progressed the first time around, and we definitely did not want to get into any sort of sticky situations again the second time around, because we were again an hour away from the birth center. Even though we chose a different birth center with our second baby, it was still an hour away. So we got everything ready. My mom came to pick up the kids. Our stepdaughter and my biological daughter. She came to pick them up, and watching my first biological daughter walk out the door, knowing that she was going to come back no longer being my baby, was, I'm even crying now. It was like so heartbreaking, and I don't know why I was so emotional about it, because it's exciting inviting another baby into the family, but she wasn't going to be my baby anymore, and that was such a weird thing for me. But they left. I again made my electrolyte drink, the lime and coconut and salt and honey and all that good stuff. Got that all ready to go, and I just made sure I continued to make that effort, that every time that there was a contraction, that I would just go ahead and stop whatever I was doing and close my eyes, take some deep breaths, and fully relax. Not because it was painful at all, but just to help my body progress through labor, because again, I did not want to get to a point of exhaustion. I wanted to help my body go through labor as quickly and easily as possible. So that was just the way that I approached it. We did go ahead and lay down for a little bit after the kids were gone and rested through some of the contractions.
She's between contraction. We are in a contraction. In a contraction. It was a 36-second contraction.
Yep.
Major intensity.
Still super mild.
The camera doesn't need to know that.
Wait till they were about every 5 minutes, and that they were about 45 seconds long. Didn't take super long. By the time that we were leaving the house, I want to say it was about 5:30. Again, with this birth, they were not painful at all, not at all uncomfortable. And I kind of expected it to be that way because of the first birth. Oh man, foot cramp. Ugh, it's like, I'm very pregnant right now, so lots of cramps. When we called the midwife, she was suggesting that we just stick around the house as well. And we didn't do that because we knew that with a second birth that it can be faster than a first birth. We didn't want to be an hour away and things all of a sudden pick up like they had last time. So we went ahead and just got everything in the car and made our way over to the city where that birth center was located, and figured out if we had to, we could just hang out in the car. We had no problem doing that. I started having very, very mild contractions at about 2 o'clock, and then texted James at about 3. Well, it was about 2:40 when I texted you, right? But I think you got it about...
I think it was about 3.
About 3 o'clock, yeah. Just because they're like relatively consistent. I've had like a little bit of Braxton Hicks this time around. I didn't have any with our first baby. And so I was wanting to wait until like I was getting more than just 3 contractions and then them fizzling out. But they've been continuing. With our first baby, I did not have really any sort of intensity with my contractions until the very last 30 minutes of labor. So we just called the midwife and told her that I've been having contractions every 5 minutes, and that they're lasting roughly 30 to 45 seconds, so they're relatively consistent. However, she did tell us there's a full moon tonight and a lot of moms are calling about having contractions, so just like stay home and see how things are going. We know from our first birth that staying at home is probably not the best idea, because when I was at this point, like I said, I didn't have any sort of intensity until the very last 30 minutes. So like we got to the birth center last time, and I really still didn't believe that I was in labor, honestly. I thought that I was only like 1 or 2 centimeters dilated maybe, and my husband very much encouraged us to go inside, and so we did, and checked me, and I was actually 6 centimeters dilated. So we're just going ahead and making our way to the birth center because we're an hour away, and we're just gonna hang out and just keep resting until there is like some level of quote-unquote intensity, and then we'll call the midwife again and tell her that we're there.
Yes.
And if it takes them 30 minutes to get there, that's fine, but at least we're in the area and we're not rushing last minute, especially with a second baby. We're not sure how quickly this one could go, so we just want to make sure that we're in the area and that we're not an hour away when I'm getting ready to push out a baby. So that's where we're at right now. Any other details?
Sounds pretty good.
So right now I'm just gonna try to relax. We've got our 51-mile stretch, so I'm gonna lay down, and pretty much all that we do, and this is what we did last time as well, is I just laid down during contractions and just closed my eyes and just relaxed my body completely, and that was very effective, and it kept things going. Like I don't do a lot of moving around or a lot of walking, and I should start my contraction timer.
Doesn't work.
So that's all I'm gonna be doing, and that's pretty much it. So I'll keep you guys updated. So my husband just went to get some McDonald's. It's our tradition apparently. We literally never eat McDonald's, but just so happens that that's what's in the area, and just so happened that that's what we got last time as well. And so I'm just resting still. The contractions are definitely getting more intense. They're not painful. Like I said,
I really did not have painful contractions with my first birth until the last 30 minutes. Last 30 minutes, it was like I went through transition and pushing at the same time. It was just really, really fast. I can feel like the cervix opening and stretching, but other than that, it's pretty chill.
We are sitting outside at McDonald's. We were gonna try to get breakfast, but they don't do breakfast all day anymore. Oh, how sad. Yes, we are running under 5 minutes per contraction, but just under a minute, or averaging 50 seconds to a minute the last little bit. Yes, so you can put your phone up to a mirror or whatever you're watching on and see all that. So, but yes, 4 minutes 36 seconds in the last hour, contractions being 40 seconds apart. One of those was skewed because I was talking to her during the contraction, and I think that threw that off. But yeah, 45, 52, 51, 47, 44, 45, 40. So yeah, doing pretty good. And here is her layout.
All propped up. A body pillow. Any padding I could find in the car.
Yes.
But we're just a couple minutes away from the birth center, so we're in the area.
I'm getting some food because I'm hungry, and mommy is fine.
Yes.
So.
And we relaxed in the car for a little bit. You know, we weren't really in any hurry at that point because we were pretty close to the birth center. I again reclined in the car. Wasn't having super intense contractions, but I could tell that they were getting more intense. And from the experience of my first birth, I could tell that, yeah, we were going to have the baby tonight because they were getting regular enough and intense enough that I could tell my cervix was stretching out. Now, the frustrating thing about this one, so we called the midwife, right, and told her that we were already in town. She said, thank goodness you called me because I was just about to pack up and go home. We told her that things were definitely progressing. She had been a little concerned before because apparently it was like a full moon or something like that, and I guess sometimes moms have fake contractions during full moons, which is sort of weird. I'd never heard that before. But we could tell that this was definitely going to be the day. So we called her again. She said, okay, go ahead and just, you know, if you want to, you can come in and get checked. I said, yeah, let's do it because with that first birth, when I got checked, I was 6 centimeters dilated. So why not, right?
Okay, it's 7:14 p.m. and we are going to go get a cervical check. And I really don't think that I am 6 centimeters, which is what I need to be in order to be admitted. But we just wanted to kind of have a feel for where we're at because the midwife who's currently there is planning on leaving and she lives 30 minutes away. So we want to just make sure that we're not doing anything last minute because that would be kind of rough. So here we go, into the birth center.
We go ahead and make our way into the birth center. She checks me and I'm 2.5 centimeters dilated, which was not what I was expecting. I did not expect to be super dilated because I had not been in labor for very long. Again, the contractions were not intense, but it just was so very different from my first birth. I just wasn't expecting it. So we weren't allowed to be checked into a room, but she did say that we could stick around in the lobby if we wanted to. They have sort of a couch in the back lobby area. So she gave me the peanut ball and we just got comfortable. I laid down on the couch and took some deep breaths, kept my timer app out. Things continued to be consistent. You know, it was every 5 minutes, 45-second long contractions. They were getting more intense, like they were definitely getting more intense. Still not crazy painful or anything, but definitely more intense. So I could tell things were progressing. Thought for sure that I had to be progressing just fine, that things had to be dilating. And man, around 8:30 maybe, so maybe on like an hour and a half after we got there, she went ahead and checked me again, and I was still 2.5 centimeters dilated. That was so frustrating because I just was not progressing, and I could feel it. I could feel the progression, and it felt very similar to my first birth. But by that point, by that stage of intensity, as unintense as it may have been, by that stage of intensity, I was already 6 centimeters dilated with my first birth. And with this one, I just was not dilating. Nothing was changing, which was really frustrating. So the midwife, you know, she was very understanding, very helpful through this whole process, which was amazing. I'm so glad she did not send us home because we would have had the baby at home because things progressed really weird. But she texted me, you know, nothing's changed. So she went ahead and sent me outside to do some curb walking. So my husband and I went outside and we're doing the curb walking thing, the 1 foot up on one curb and then the other foot on the flat surface on the ground. And it's supposed to help sort of tilt the pelvis if there's like a baby positioning issue. And a lot of times if you're having contractions that are getting more intense but you're not dilating, that can mean that the baby's just not in a really great position and that the head's not putting enough pressure on the cervix to help it stretch out and dilate. So we're trying to tilt the baby into the pelvis, and now would stop every 3 minutes or so, I think, at that point, and have a contraction, breathe through it. We did it on one side, and then we turned around and did it on the other side. So with my other leg propped up on the curb and walked like that for a little bit, had a couple more contractions, went back inside, laid back down on the couch with the peanut ball.
The time is 8:50. Stephanie has measured it at 2.5, but baby is pushing more. We just did some curb walking to help move the position of baby. Stephanie is back on the peanut ball, relaxing and preparing for contractions. They have definitely grown in intensity.
And at this point, the contractions really did start to get more intense than I could remember with my first birth. So I thought for sure I had to be progressing, I had to be dilating, because I mean, I was starting to vocalize at this point through the contractions because they were not comfortable. They really didn't feel good. It was not crazy yet, but it was not comfortable. And at one point, the midwife came out, and I think she kind of checked my vitals through one of the contractions, and she could hear me vocalizing, so I think she knew that things were progressing, and she knew that there was no reason to send us home per se. But she asked if we were ready to go. Well, she said, I think at that point she said, hey, let's go ahead and go get you checked again. So we go back into one of the rooms, and she lays me down on the bed and checks me, and I'm only 4 centimeters dilated. And I think with that birth center, you had to be 5 or 6 centimeters dilated in order to be checked into an actual birthing center room and get your bathtub. You know, they have like the inflatable bathtubs there, and have your own bed and have your essential oils going in the diffuser. And we just weren't getting there, which was so frustrating. It took me forever just to even get to that office in the first place to get checked, because I was really getting uncomfortable at this point. And when she checked me, I was like, I mean, I was really vocalizing because it really did not feel good at that point. My cervix was definitely having a lot more pushing on it. And I think what she did, without telling me, I think she sort of tried to stretch it a little bit so that she could help it make some progress. So it did not feel good when she had her hand in there. It really did not feel good. I started to panic a little bit when she told me 4 centimeters, because I was starting to feel as uncomfortable as I did with my first birth when I was like 7 centimeters dilated, when I was hitting transition. And I said that out loud. I'm like, I don't understand how I'm only 4 centimeters. This is how I felt last time when I was going into transition. She, I think, trusted that. And she later told us that she was literally just looking for some sort of change in dilation, and then she was going to go ahead and send us into the room. And I'm so grateful that she did. I'm so grateful for that midwife. So even though we were just 4 centimeters dilated, she went ahead and let us go into the room. I was having a really hard time walking by this point. My husband was supporting me. I was sort of hobbling, crouched over through the hallways. It was really, really uncomfortable. I think at this point, it was about 10 o'clock. Okay, so we're talking about 40 minutes before baby's born. Maybe less than that. Maybe it was like 10:10, because the last part went really quick. And I'm 4 centimeters dilated. Okay, keep this in mind. I was only 4 centimeters dilated. We hobble over to the room. They had already very knowingly, very wisely filled up the tub with warm water, so everything was ready for us. They asked if I wanted some essential oils in the diffuser. I said yes. They got that set up. Everything was ready to go. So I think they knew what was going on. Just for some reason, I wasn't having that dilation, which was really weird. But I got in the tub, had a couple really intense contractions, and then I started feeling that pushing again, that same pushing sensation that I had felt with my first birth. And I recognized it this time because I knew what that was. And I said, like, how is it possible for me to be, this is what I said out loud, right? Like, how is it possible that I'm already pushing when I was just 4 centimeters dilated? And the midwife who had checked me is like, oh, hun, it's possible. And I was just so grateful for her for being knowledgeable. The fact that every birth is just so different. And for me, I went from 4 centimeters dilated to pushing, which was just weird. It was bizarre, but that's what happened. So they let me do my thing. They let my body do its thing, which I was so grateful for. And I felt the pushing, and then I would get a little bit of a break, and I'd have another really intense contraction, and then I'd feel that really intense pushing again. I think the second or third time that I had an intense contraction like that, my water broke. This time, it wasn't with my first birth, right? My water broke, and then there was like immediately an intense contraction, and the head came out. With this one, my water broke kind of on its own, and then the contraction sort of eased off after that. So I had a little bit of a break between my water breaking and pushing the head out. Water broke. They checked the water. They saw a little bit of meconium in the water. So that's just something that if you see meconium when the water breaks, then they just have to be cautious, because I guess there's some concern with that with your baby pooping inside the womb, I guess. After the water broke, had a little bit of a break, and then again my body sort of went into that expulsion reflex, if you will, just pushed my baby out without me really having to do a whole lot. But because I knew what was going on this time, and I could tell that my body was in that pushing stage, I was able to get my body into the correct position. And I was in a different position this time. I wasn't laying on my back in the water, sprawled out and freaking out. I was more leaned forward and was more in a squatting position, and that was just what felt right for me with that birth. And I was able to kind of squat into it and help my body through the pushing. That, for both births, was just by far the most uncomfortable part. You know, it wasn't like I had a difficult transition and then got to push. It's almost like transition and pushing happen at the same time for me. I know that's not actually the case, but that's what it feels like, because pushing is so painful and is so intense. And not painful because of stretching, but painful because the contractions that are going along with that pushing are really uncomfortable contractions. They're just really painful. And so at that point, when I'm pushing, I'm yelling, I'm very, very vocal. I'm not one of those women that can just hunker down and hold my breath and push. I'm gonna try it this time. I'm gonna see if I can make it this time, but I haven't been able to with my first 2 births. No, I'm like yelling the baby out, which works just fine for me. After the water breaks, like a little bit of a break, I believe that the very next contraction that I had was that kind of expulsion reflex, really intense contraction where I was able to push the head out. So it was still pretty quick again. And after that, I had a little bit of trouble getting the rest of him out, because I think his shoulder kind of got stuck. And again, I was sort of leaned forward in a sort of squat position. And the midwife could tell that he was having a hard time coming out. So she instructed me to stand up and wanted me to get into the bed. Keep in mind, I had a baby's head sticking out of me at this point, and it was really uncomfortable. I mean, if you've had a baby before, you know how uncomfortable that is. And so she's telling me to get in the bed, and I'm shouting, I can't. And then all 3, like the midwife and her assistant and my husband, are all behind me and sort of trying to help the baby out. And what she had wanted to do was get me on the bed, and then she was going to actually reach her hand and then help wiggle the shoulder out. Fortunately, very fortunately for me, because I could not move, fortunately, when we sort of stood me up and I was sort of half leaned forward, I guess that moved my position enough that he was able to get his shoulder out, and then the rest of him came out. Then they were able to slip him underneath of me and put him in my arms. And I was able to sit down and just hold him and take a breath. But that was definitely different than my first birth. It was a different experience. With the first one, I think because it was so fast and it hadn't been crazy intense except for that last half hour, I was feeling pretty good. I didn't tear with my first birth, but I had some mild abrasions that were definitely uncomfortable afterwards that I had to recover from. There was a lot of stinging down there around the perineum. That was definitely very uncomfortable. With my second birth, I had nothing. No tearing, no abrasions, no nothing. So there was no discomfort following birth. It was just immediately following birth, you have those contractions that you still have that are still kind of uncomfortable. They're more like period cramps at that point. but definitely a little bit more intense. And at that point, I think because it was later when he was born with my second birth, I was a little bit more tired after that one, and I was having a little bit harder of a time just enjoying the whole experience. And normally you'll latch the baby on within an hour of delivery because it's supposed to help kickstart the breastfeeding experience, which we did that. But when your baby's breastfeeding, it also increases the intensity of the contractions, which is good. It's healthy for your body. It helps your uterus clamp down. It helps stop any sort of bleeding that might be in there. It starts to heal your body. It starts, getting your body back to where it needs to be. That's a healthy thing. It's a healthy process. But it's also really uncomfortable. And the midwives, they do give you ibuprofen if you want it after you've given birth. Because at that point, who cares? At least at that point, I don't care. I want ibuprofen. So I had that, but it did take a while for it to kick in, and I was just so uncomfortable and in a lot of pain still. So I, with my first baby, with my little girl, I held her the entire time. The several hours following birth, she was just on me, and I just held her and held her and held her, and that was great. But with my boy, I actually had, I think after the first hour of him being on me, I had to pass him to my husband, and he did the skin-to-skin contact thing with him because I was just in so much pain and I really needed a break. And it's hard to reduce the intensity of those contractions when your baby's on you and trying to breastfeed, because that, like I said, it just increases the intensity. So I took a little bit of a break. I think I dozed off for a little bit, and then we sort of got packed up, and they send you home with birth centers. They don't keep you around. So it was like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning when we drove back home, that hour drive to our home. And he slept great. He's always been a really great sleeper, which is also very, very different from my first baby. The reality is that every birth is going to be different, and I'll be very curious to see how this one goes. I'm really looking forward to it. For probably a year and a half after my boy was born, I was very hesitant to get pregnant again because I did the memory of that intensity of birth stuck around a little bit longer than it did with my first baby. With my first baby, I was like, that's fine, let's do it again. It was easy, it was fun. Because the amnesia apparently kicked in really quickly. It took longer with my baby boy for me to kind of accept the idea of having another kid. In fact, I would say it probably wasn't until a couple months into this pregnancy that I really started to come to terms with, like, okay, I feel ready. And now we're 3rd trimester, and I'm like, let's do it. Let's bring it on. let's go into labor. Not yet, obviously. We have 2.5 months still. But I will definitely share that birth story when that happens as well. We're delivering at the same place that we delivered in with my second baby. We loved it, had a really great experience. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So stay tuned.